Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked
and sometimes what didn't.
You will also hear very personal experiences
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
and inspire you to do even greater things.
Before we jump into today's conversation, a special thanks to PM Power Consulting for encouraging and supporting this show right from the start. With over 1,000 person-years of collective experience, PM Power has helped many organizations, teams, and individuals chart out their own journeys of excellence and make progress. Thank you, PM Power. A special thanks to all of you listeners. This is episode 350 of the Software People Stories. We wouldn't have grown and had such a loving base without all your support and you sharing it among your circles. Thanks a lot. My guest today is Galvin Widjaja, founder and CEO of Loretta.io. He is also my first Indonesian guest. Galvin talks about his origin story and also his entrepreneurial journey that kind of runs in the family and how he got into AI and computer vision. He talks about the family influence on his entrepreneurial journey, including his father's and grandfather's business, and the pivot to AI and what led him to a very interesting company, Loretta.io. Listen on. Hi, Galvin. Welcome to the Software People Stories.
Hi, Shiv. How are you doing? Great to be here.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm right. You're probably the first Indonesian on the Software People Stories.
It is possible. Indonesia is a very fascinating place in the technology space. There are a lot of Indonesians around, but the structure of how it works in Indonesia, where the top engineering university in Indonesia is not in a big city. It is in Bandung, which is a very small mountain city, right? And so because of that, there are very few international Indonesian software engineers that you will see. However, if you are a software engineer yourself and you're on GitHub looking at open source software, there are a lot of Indonesians contributing in the space. So they're very good. They just don't see them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. So before we get more deeper into that, maybe a quick introduction, your origin story, how you got associated with IT and things that you've been doing, and then we'll take it from there.
Sure. And so maybe I'll start where I am and kind of work my way back a little bit. So currently, I am living in Austin, in Texas, running a AI company that serves primarily the US government. And so we are a deep tech AI company doing computer vision for security and all of that. But if you roll back many years, I have no official software background. So let me share a little bit about kind of my origin story. So I was born in Singapore, to an Indonesian father and to a Singaporean mother. Both of these families are entrepreneur families who are uneducated but very successful in these particular industries. So my grandfather is from Singapore, is a contractor. And my grandfather in Indonesia works in a restaurant chain. Now, the interesting thing about people who are in their 80s, who are 80 and 90-year-old this year, right? So people who are born in the 30s and 40s, 1930, 1940, is that they started their business during a global transition, especially in Asia. A lot of things were changing. And so they made money by leveraging the transition more than any brilliant technical idea. And so if I kind of have a one-liner for each, my grandfather in Singapore was a Chinese speaking contractor who was able to negotiate with the British government, who was still pulling out of they were still pulling out of Southeast Asia in the 90s, post-World War II. And so he made his money from government contracting. In other words, building roads for the major development in Singapore. My grandfather in Indonesia, in 1986, started a restaurant chain, right? And so very, very cheap food, roughly about 20 cents in US cents per meal. And they were making like noodles and Indonesian Chinese food. They were one of the 4 or 5 companies that created what is known today as Jakarta street food. So if you are suddenly a traveler today to Jakarta, you know that Jakarta itself, the capital, has something called Jakarta street food, which is not Indonesian food. It is not Chinese food. This Indonesian tasting Chinese food, right? It's noodles. They did a lot of that. Um, and the reason why they were so successful, was that Indonesia, like in India, has a lot of entrepreneurship in their blood, but not many good opportunities for entrepreneurship. Opportunities that come in from the US require like an upfront of 200,000 US dollars. It's like no young entrepreneur has 200,000 US dollars. Not in Indonesia, not in India, right? And so what he was he was the first Indonesian-owned Indonesian food franchise that you could buy. You could buy it for $10,000 for a franchise.
Wow.
And for a short period of time, they went from 5 stores to 350 stores.
Oh.
They grew that way. And so they were very successful. And because they were so successful and so uneducated, my mom's generation, all of them essentially didn't work.
Mhm.
So they did nothing.
Yeah.
They were suddenly incredibly rich when they were in their teens, and then they leveraged inheritance money their whole lives. And so my generation were people who were kind of refinding their footing as the grandparents' money was slowly drying up. Okay, and so that was my basis. If you looked at AI people today, one of the important things that you must realize that people like myself who are late 30s, I'm 40 next year. So we did not have an AI degree. An AI degree did not exist when we were in university. I was fortunate to have what is the second or third best option, which is that I studied to be a quant. So quant finance, high-speed trading, is a lot of matrix multiplication. It's matrix multiplication as fast as you can go, like Moneyball kind of thing. And so because of that, it was surprisingly well aligned with what became the neural network 10 years later. Fundamentally the same technology. In fact, I often say that even today, the AI industry has not matured to the state of the quantitative finance industry, which does the same thing, which is processing a few streams of data and then producing very deep insight out of it. When I was studying in the AI space, everybody was an AI scientist, right? That's this word, right? AI engineer and AI scientist, data scientist. And in the quant finance space, that role didn't exist because it had already been fully expanded into the 6 fundamental components: the trader, the risk analysis, the quantitative, the data modeler, and so on, which is the same structure that now exists in the AI space today. So if you look at the start of OpenAI, it now looked like a quant fund 10 years ago. So it's fundamentally the same. We did that. I was religious, and so I did a mission trip to Indonesia from Singapore.
Okay.
I did a mission trip doing business to cottage industries in Sumatra. Taking the work that I did there, I got a job in consulting. Because quant finance is great for math, but it is the least businessy business degree. It's the only business degree where you never write a business plan. And so I had an opportunity in my mission trip to write a business plan. I got that to enter into the consulting space, where I became the only technical consultant in an Australian consultancy, which called Litmus Group, which has who has since become acquired by PwC Australia. But I worked there as a technical consultant, and that's where I learned IT.
Okay.
Because I started in business processing, which is kind of like SAP, supply chains, and drawing rectangles, and solution architect, solution explorer, and stuff like that. And then I programmed the analytics behind it. And then I was forced to learn JavaScript and C++ by myself. And then the good thing about people in my era is even when you're learning high-level languages like JavaScript, in the year 2011, 2012, you have to go down into the bare metal because the technology was very slow. One of the risks that I see with a lot of my engineers today is that they don't need to, right? So a Python engineer may never learn how to make Python any faster than it is, which is not very fast. So I did that, and I did that for 5 years. I made a number of very important mistakes in that time, which eventually led me to being slowly pushed out of the consultancy. I was very lucky at that time. I was picked up by one of my former clients to become one of the big data managers in DBS Bank, which is
Okay.
the sovereign bank of Singapore. And then from there, I moved from business process into data processing. When the data and during that time, something interesting happened, which is that my parents had divorced when I was very, very young, when I was about 11, 12 years old. For a lot of people who are in education, my landmark for this is very clear because they thought about divorce when I was doing my PSLE, my school leaving exam. They finalized it during my O levels when I was 16, and they closed. So the official closure executed when I was doing my A levels. So my three
Oh,
university degrees were aligned. So I always remember, right? Because during my prelims, there was an update to the family status every time. And so when I did that, I didn't really communicate with my father much. My father had started and ended many businesses when I was very young, and that's how I got exposed to the business world. But I live with my mother in Singapore, and I never knew that I wanted to be a business person. That's why quant is kind of the business angle into becoming a scientist, right? It's you hide in the room with numbers, and then when what happened during that time was that I was asked to take over a restaurant chain in Singapore. I took over. It was only then I realized that my dad had started three or four of the Indonesian chain in Singapore, specifically to be near me and my brother,
Oh,
who he had separated from. Okay. I didn't know any of this because my mom had kind of like not told us about it, right? But I had to take it over because of work permit issue. So essentially, he had lost his work permit. I had to be the director. When I went into the chain, it was a very visceral experience. There's a lot of people who are in the gray area of work permits. So, like for example, people on dependent passes, right? So
yeah,
people who are not supposed to be working, who are working, and so on and so forth. And so I realized that I had to deeply manage it because if not, I could be blindsided by an arrest warrant, right? For somebody complaining about this thing. I'm now the director. And so I deeply managed that for many years. And that was a very unique opportunity for me to realize how all of the stuff that has been happening in the digital world, automation and acceleration and the reduction of manpower and all of the developments from software were completely not affecting the physical world. And it is always a bizarre thing for me, right? When we were less than 10 years ago, Amazon was 10% of all sales. And the and what has been happening is that it has been expanding, right? The amount of sales that is happening online has been expanding, not because Amazon has become so much better. It was already same day. It was already Amazon Prime 15 years ago. But because the physical world has been completely stagnant. And what is the fundamental technologies that are missing from that? And I think my TLDR, my simple way of thinking about it is data question. It's a data question. They are not running on data. And so I built a system around analyzing the physical world, first for my restaurant, first the operational data, then the customer data. And then when AI stepped in, Joe Seng Lassa and Lendlease, two big property managers, put money into our firm, and we expanded into the physical analytics space.
Okay.
And yeah, that's how I started my company. I started my company today, a kind of a government tier AI security company, specifically to analyze the people coming in and out of my restaurant
Oh,
and scaling it out. Yeah.
yeah. Fantastic. I think, yeah, it was a lot to unpack here. Well, I understand that no, probably being an entrepreneur is in your genes. How was the shift from quant, like you said, if you're just working with the screen and keyboard and probably in the back office, to working with people?
So that was probably my biggest mistake when I was in consulting.
Mhm.
Uh, and my belief, and I think a lot of engineers have this belief, and this belief is if I am the only person who knows this technique,
Hmm.
and this technique is essential to the business, I am indispensable, right? And I believe this, and I think there's kind of a whole range of those. There are those where it is a complete lie. The business can run without you, or you are the only person to do it because it is not that valuable and they don't really care to give you a backup. That's that one. On the other end, there are those people where it's like it's a certified. I'm the only person who can sign off for this kind of thing, which is also true. I was closer to the right side where the primary value of the consulting that we were doing, so SAP consulting, was around you optimize the process and then you report on the optimization. I was the only report writer in the entire business.
Hmm.
And so all of the reports that go to management, half of them are generated entirely through my data. What ended up happening was that uh, I think, and this was the big mystery. One is that it actually was an impact to the business when they removed me.
Oh,
However, that is their problem and not mine, right? Because if the net is that they had to pivot out of that particular industry, which is their own problem. But whether I was right or wrong did not affect the fact that I was on the PIP, right? So
yeah.
was on the firing block. Um, and a big part of that was two things. One is um, I did not understand the fundamental consulting capability. And the way I think about it today is that consulting is all about being the greatest employee. So
Hmm.
all of the things that a normal employee does, but 10x version of this thing, right?
Mhm.
Like the project management and the communication and the transparency and the accountability and essentially the so-called what a lot of consultants call the safe pair of hands,
Ah.
often with the credibility of the business, but a safe pair of hands
Mhm.
component. I was not that. And a big part of that is not about providing the data. It's about being the communicator of the data. And the communication of data is not necessarily also about writing the perfect script,
Hmm.
but understanding the way that the person receives the narrative, which often requires me to understand that person.
Mhm.
Now, that was a big mistake for me when I was in early days of consulting. I fixed that after a few iterations when I was in banking. And one of the big reasons why I wasn't able to fix it when I was in consulting, and a lot of people who are in the so-called top tier consulting firms will experience this, where they come in, they find a flaw and they get fired from the flaw before they fix the flaw. Like I
Yeah.
am a bad documentation person, and before I am able to fix it, 6 months later, 1 year later, I'm gone. Right. And one of the reasons for that is that consulting is I thought consulting was working in 10 different jobs.
Hmm.
And what I realized is that consulting is working in one job for 10 different companies. So I was doing the same process 10 times, right? And so I never experienced the end state. I would often look back at projects that I did 5, 6 years ago and like, oh, the company had abandoned the project because no champion and so on and so forth. And so I didn't really have the feedback loop to
Hmm.
understand what I was doing wrong.
Hmm.
When I moved into DBS, into a bank, I proposed my own project. After a couple of years, I was more known in the space. The project that I did is a project that is known as a regulation tech or reg tech project. And
Okay.
the reg tech project is to kind of understand it is if you know the financial space is very straightforward. 80% of people who work in banking, almost everybody who is not in a branch, works in compliance of some sort, which is that there is a
Hmm.
process that the bank has to complete. Many of these processes are mandated by the government. In certain countries, such as in Singapore, they mandate extra processes actually to protect the financial industry. So, for
Okay.
example, State Bank of India tried to enter to Singapore and left 3 times. So they entered and left, entered and left, entered and left. And a lot of it was based on the burden of documentation and compliance required.
Okay.
And they unless you have like a critical mass, 30% of the population, it is not financially viable to generate the 1900 documents that MAS requires, essentially. And so I was working in that space. And so I proposed a solution that essentially said every time a policy comes down, instead of the lawyer writes their own stuff and then the regulation people write their own stuff and then the process people write their own stuff and then we have 3 years to align it, each component is thematically hard linked and the data at the process level. So that, for example, DBS was the first Southeast Asian bank to be FedCa approved. And so people who are in my era, Shiv, I'm sure you are also in the era, remember when the US government decided that the whole world will be FedCa compliant. That means if you have a US citizen in the bank, there has to be a special report that goes to the IRS. US is the only country in the world that requires reporting from non-US financial entities. Right? And if you are not compliant, at one point all of Japan banks were not compliant, then all US entities would have to not use your banking service.
Yeah.
Right? And so we were the first bank to be compliant for that. And so we did that kind of process. And that is when I learned the power of the communication piece. So while regulation is simple, regulation in banking has the characteristic of touching every single individual in the bank. And so when I built my project plan together with my boss, and I was very blessed to have two bosses who were extremely capable and very powerful and very anti-political. A lot of politics in big banks are driven by controlling your kind of what they call consolidating your territory, right? Which is that you don't step into my space, except for the 4 or 5 people who are so popular with the bank that they are essentially the lieutenants or the CEO to drive kind of the bulldozers through the territories. And I was very lucky to be working for a bulldozer driver, essentially. Right? So I was working with these guys. And essentially, when I built the map, I had 139 stakeholders. So 139 people had to sign off this year in the next 24 months, in the next 16 or 17 months for the project to be approved. And I was like, what the heck do? But we did it. We did it with a month to spare. And a lot of people who work in in banking will know that there is very few projects that finish on time. Most of them overlap. And so because we finished our project with 1 month to spare, there was actually no process in the bank to give you extra work. And so I had no work for 1 month. And so during that time, I learned the structure of communication. And a big part of that is understanding the stakeholders' needs and tailoring it to that. So it could be your existing pain point, but in a lot of processes, it is a question of it could be there's a simpler strategy that is much more consistent, and that is everybody has different pain, right? But the pain takes on the flavor of the person when they receive it. Okay, so like let's say I have a process that requires you to ask everybody for their US permanent resident status or whatever, right? US significant presence status. A significant presence is a very complicated process because at that point in time, no one had any idea what that means. So it's like the government had invented a new question. I ask you this question. It is a legally binding question. And so you are very stressed when I ask you this question. Like, I say the wrong thing, suddenly you owe the bank a lot of money. And so it's like, okay, the pain is coming and then the flavor gets changed. So the person who is doing the call center, that pain has a different flavor, which is training and communication and a much more sophisticated QA session with the person who is doing the call center. The person who is doing the compliance or the online system is very different, which is that they have to provide a form that cannot be self-populated. You need to have the person open a form with like the US government, IRS, and that kind of thing. And so there is a different flavor. And so what I learned is before the pain comes to you, the incoming pain feels the same.
Okay.
When it hits you, then it feels
Yeah.
different, right? It's like a bullet flying. One person hits the head, he's got a headache. One person hit the thigh, got a leg pain, right? So the pain, the bullets fly. And so rather than talk to them about their incoming pain, I align my project with dispersing rather than deal with the existing pain, which everybody has a different story. I took up my project in terms of dispersing the incoming pain. And so by doing that, they avoid something that they do not know, but the narrative is much more similar. And so that made the narrative a lot more straightforward. And so it's a question of meeting, right? The so I think the 2 points of that I learned, right? One is the communication is important, but the important thing about the communication is you need to, if you are going to make a person trust you, you need to bring yourself to a level where you have a close level of respect to the person. You never let the person believe that you are better than them. You clearly are not. There is no way that you know what he does. But you need to be respectable, right? So that they can trust you. And yet you need to have a component that will help them, right? So you can say, I'm worse than you, but I know this pain that is coming better, right? Like a pastor kind of thing, right? And so we have this communication with the 139 people, some of them which I only talked to like 5 times. For example, DBS has an office in New York. And there's this one who's in charge of the New York office, right? And he's my one stakeholder, and he's the only person on the whole Western Hemisphere, right?
Oh.
And so it's like, okay, he is the only person who doesn't have a fat car problem because he's in New York.
Yeah.
But I tailor my communication so that if I can educate him just enough that he can sit on my call with the guy from UK, then I can get both of them on my side. And that was kind of how the narrative
Yeah.
kind of went through. And yeah, that's kind of the learning, right? That there is this human process. And to be honest, right, I mean, a little bit autistic, a little bit of a math geek type of person. And so I often look at human relationships in a completely Excel spreadsheetable way. And it may sound horrible to people who are on the call, but if you were a McKinsey consultant, McKinsey has a stakeholder sheet for every project, and it also has everybody's relationships in a spreadsheet. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. So the other question that came to my mind is when you had to run this restaurant chain,
Yeah.
and restaurant being a high touch and the hospitality business being all about experience, how
100%.
did you go about ensuring consistency across the locations?
I made the mistake early on of believing that consistency at every level is the most important thing, and it is not.
Oh,
I think there is no question it's not. In fact, our kind of restaurant is known in the industry as a QSR, right? Quick service restaurant.
okay.
Yeah. Quick service restaurants include all the fast food. In places like India, the word fast food means different things. So like Sarabana Bhavan would be considered a fast food in India, even though it's in the restaurant chain and eating rice. But it is fast food, right? And so in the quick service industry, I remember going to a conference in Singapore. And in that conference, one of the panels had the CEO of Southeast Asia's KFC, and there was another CEO of Southeast Asia's Subway.
Okay.
Okay. And the um and the Subway guy was pretty young, He was running a very big business, and he was asking the KFC person, like, I have problems because outside of Indonesia, outside of Singapore, they're all doing their own stuff, and Subway is very, very pedantic about their standards. I can give you a quick hack because there's Subways all around the world. One of the tricks that Subway uses is you look at the lettuce. The lettuce,
Yeah.
right? The first thing that goes into your thing is the lettuce. If your lettuce is long, okay, that means the person is not using Subway's approved food.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Why do I say that? Because it's a very silly thing, but it's one of the classic tricks that they use. Subway doesn't want when you bite your sandwich to have lettuce coming out of your mouth, and so Subway lettuce is square.
Okay.
It's pushed through a meat cutter, a square cutter,
Okay.
which their factories use, and they sell it in bags. But if you don't want to buy it directly from them and you buy it from your own store, which is cheaper, then you're probably going to slice it. And if you slice it, it's lump. And so it's a classic thing that you can use to check whether the guy is using the approved ingredients. Okay. But essentially, the guy in KFC said, okay, KFC is the most successful restaurant chain in Southeast Asia. Simply because KFC is chicken and a lot of Southeast Asia is Muslim, and so the Muslims obviously will not touch a place that sells beef and so on. Right? So, but touch pork and so on and so forth. So there's a bunch of things like that. There are also a lot of Buddhists who don't eat beef, and so chicken is the only thing that's eaten by both the Buddhists and the Muslims, right? So, yeah. So he essentially said, I let every country define their own standard.
Okay.
And the person in Subway was like, there is no way you do that. And it's like, that is exactly what we do. And I learned the same thing, which is that when it comes to food with a name brand, you may think that you are McDonald's and your name represents standard and likelihood and the style of food and the version and everything. And no, in most cases, that's not true. In fact, in many cases, you will have a shop where the one that sells to in the busy area and the one that sells in the hot marketplace, they look completely different. That's okay. But you can even sell at different price, they also don't care. What is important is that the core taste of the food is what connects them to you. And so we had a central kitchen that sold the frozen concentrated sauces for every single component of the food out. And then the food is made fresh. And so it became very silly. Instead of saying something like, you need to have how many grams, a lot of the people that are working in space don't really know. And so we use a metal hammer to hammer a wok spoon into a particular shape. And that shape is one scoop. So 2 fried rice equal to 1 scoop sauce. And so when the scoop is full, you can make 2 fried rice. Done. That's kind of how we did that. Everything else was a mistake. So every other kind of optimization was worse. Instead, I can tell you very simply, when I first started, I didn't really know the people and I wasn't very personable, and I thought that I would never be able to connect with them. When I first took over the business, obviously that changed over the years. But I only made one good decision in the first 3 months, and that is to blindly, without looking at any of the data, increase the salaries of everybody by 10%.
Okay.
And so they're like, you don't know me, you don't really connect with me. My Indonesian was very bad. My dad lived in Indonesia his whole life, so obviously they all spoke in Indonesian. My Indonesian at that point in time was very bad. I'd never been to Indonesia for 15 years because my mom don't allow me to go back to where my dad was. You don't know me, and I don't know what you need, but I will increase your salary by 10%. And the core staff stayed for another 3 years because of that one move. And that overrode my poor management of the processes. It overrode my poor management of the kitchen because when the process fails, the human takes over, right? So if the human process is as good or better than the restaurant process, then nothing bad happens, actually, right? And then you have an opportunity to take the human process and rebuild the automated process. And so a lot of people talk about how automation will replace domain expertise. But when your automation fails, the domain expertise is still there if the person is still there. And so you can try again with your automation. because they are still there. But if that person is lost and your automation fails, or your automation in most cases is not failed, but it is a pale representation of the true depth of that human understanding, then you will not get back the delta. There's no way to get it back. And that's kind of what we learned, right?
Yeah.
So that was the key thing, right? That kind of helped that to continue. Eventually, although we were like a little store here and there, when those failed for other external reasons, we ended up taking over the restaurant of the Indonesian embassy. And so our food was so good and so authentic that the Indonesian embassy had our restaurant in the embassy.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
So,
that was.
yeah, I think from there, how did the pivot to Loretta happen? And maybe I'm also curious about the name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the name comes from that era.
Okay.
And for another 10 years that the name would be Silly. And now it's not Silly again. But the name we when I built Loretta, and my co-founder is my brother, Jason, we built Loretta with the narrative that it will be the store manager. So when we built it, the original stack was data acquisition of the customer, data acquisition of the processes, combined together to provide transparency over the business communicated by the store manager. The reason why we built it was that if you do not have a very tight, if you do not have deep reporting, which all small businesses do not really have, and there is no reason to build it. And second is if you do not have a very deep and trusting relationship with your managers, and you may think you have, but in some cases, in almost all cases, the manager has a stronger relationship with the people they work with than you because they essentially live and breathe those people's lives, right? And so if you do not have that, it's very difficult for them to tell you one of two things. There are either managers who will tell you that it is always bad, but there are managers who will tell you it's always good. There are very few managers that will tell you that things are changing, right? It's kind of like, it's more like by personality than by objectivity. Um, and it means that you have to go and dig through the data frequently. That's like kitchen nightmares, where suddenly Gordon Ramsay has to go inside and then look at the books, right? So it's kind of like that. And so instead, we are like, okay, how much of this can I automate out so that the data is in front of both of us when we talk to make our communication easier? That was the fundamental thing. The tool and Loretta was what we call your friendly store manager, and it also had an audio interface where it could talk to people on the ground, and so on and so forth. And so there were all different components of it. There was also an IoT business, so it actually had Bluetooth beacons, and there was tracking involved with people's phones and stuff like that. So there was a whole stack to it. The name Loretta is a name that sounds like Northern Southeast Asian, so Filipino Thai kind of name. Your friendliest kind of a 3-syllable friendly store manager name that also represents an AI system. And that was kind of the narrative behind the name. And then for 10 years, it was a dumb name. And then now in the world where we have embodied AI, it is not dumb anymore. So it's back again. And so that's kind of how the name started. In terms of the AI component, the reason we did two things. One, it was IoT and IoT business process and computer vision business. That was kind of how it started. First, we found out that the IoT component had a very bad ROI. And the very simple reason for that is because beacons are unreliable and very costly to manage. So very cheap to put in, very expensive to manage. Many of the top airports in the world have IoT infrastructure physically built into the airport. The most famous one being SFO, the San Francisco Airport, have Bluetooth beacons every 5 to 10 meters across the entire 4 terminals. Specifically for this one page in your SFO app called Navigate Me. It uses Bluetooth beacons to track you around. And it doesn't use the Bluetooth beacon anymore. Sucks. It's pretty bad. And the reason for that is that Bluetooth beacons are based on distance. You can only measure three distances from every Bluetooth beacon: short, medium, and far. So if you wanted it to go 10 meters, the only three ranges is 3, 6, and 10 meters. And so the concept was that if you could triangulate three beacons, you could get a precise example location of you. But the problem with Bluetooth beacons is that Bluetooth beacons are straight line measurements of RFFI. So if you are here and the Bluetooth beacon is this way, right, it would hit the wall and come back telling me that I'm twice as far away. And then when I turn it this way, I'm near.
Yes.
And so because of that, the noise supersedes the beacon. We looked at the technology, it was coming, but when the technology, something called UWC, ultra high bandwidth beacons, which are currently in every iPhone 12 and above, is now here, but it's not widely available. And so the Bluetooth beacon thing moved away. A year later, our business was very lucky to get a contract with Capital Land. Capital Land is the largest property management company in Southeast Asia. And that was to analyze all the ways they do retail analytics in Southeast Asia.
Okay.
Okay. And that included Bluetooth beacons, it included Wi-Fi, it included data acquired by your telecom provider. Telecom providers, by the way, sell your data. They included data from specialized stores like McDonald's, which also sell their data. It included the laser, right? The door counters across every single door and all of that data. And this data is mandatory for malls. It's a requirement because I'm sure you know, but every mall is a listed company indirectly. Because every mall is linked to a REIT, right? And a REIT is listed. That's how the mall gets funded. It is through this thing called REITs, right? Real Estate Investment Trust. And so all of this reporting is requirement. Is financial requirement. And so we looked at all of the data, and my simple conclusion was that the data, that was when the answer became the data component was so much worse than every other component of the business. And at that point in time, I met a person from JLL. His name is Jordan Kostelak. Jordan Kostelak used to run the prop tech of JLL component. And with that, what I learned is JLL has this famous saying called the 330-300. 330-300 is this thing in the property management space, and it says this: for every square foot of land, and the numbers are kind of localized to the US, but for every square foot of land, you'll spend $3 on utilities. So $3 on cleaning, maintenance, repairs, and air conditioning. $30 on rent, and it will generate $300 of value in terms of the work that you will sit in it. So it's like if a person sits on 30 square feet, they produce $9,000 of value, 300 times. And that's kind of how they calculated that. And it makes a lot of sense. But I think the important thing is it also means that all of our IoT businesses of 2016 and 17 who are trying to decrease utility costs by 30%, 30% utility costs has less impact on the business than a 5% increase in rental.
Okay.
Right? So 10x. And so with that, the logical thing to do is to pivot. So the analytic component is both more valuable and more important and has a larger physical impact. And so we moved into becoming a purely computer vision business in 2019.
Okay.
I was very lucky as a person who was a quant. We can kind of see through the development of AI, and because that's kind of what quant finance people do, is a lot of algorithm and analysis. And 2019 was the emergence of BERT, B-E-R-T. BERT being the first deep mind model that came out of attention is all you need, which would then create the transformer model, which would then scale into every LLM in the world today. Right? And BERT has one fundamental thing that made it very different from all the others, which is that it was two things. One is that it was what I would consider an end state architecture. That's number one. And the second is what I would consider, and it was scalable against anomaly detection,
Okay.
scalable against variation. And so, what are those two things, and why are those two things important? One is that every model up to that time only only was able to identify what it classified against. And so to modify a computer vision model, you added one new class, you reduce one more class, you modify the data structures, and so on and so forth. And so every model was extremely narrow to the point where it was not even a task, but a subtask. BERT and LLMs were not, and this has proven out over the years. But BERT has another natural component, which is that what I consider a perfect architecture. What I mean by a perfect architecture is not that it is the best architecture, but the problem was that in 2017 and 18, if you were in AI, and you were not a optimist, right? If you were a pessimist, you would say that the two major architecture types, the convolutional neural network, the CNN structure, and the RNN structure, were both intermediate structures. There was no way it was an end state structure. Why? Because the convolutional network assumes that all features are within 2 pixels of each other. And so a convolutional network is a 5 by 5 squares. And so things that are far away have almost no way of consolidating, right? And so it just there was no possible way this was the end state. Anything that has a hard-coded maximum size has no possible way of being an end state. The second one is the RNN, and the RNN was even worse because the RNN essentially said that the context for every word was within 5 words of the context. So it's like it has to be 5 words to the back and 5 words to the end. And if you have like passive voice, right, it's a 30-word sentence and the end is the words by Galvin or by Shift, then the word by Shift is very important to the narrative, right? They're very far away. So it's like there is no way these things make sense. The way that a transformer works, because it was a self-attention model, it is not the things that it added that was interesting. It was the things that it was able to subtract without collapsing, right? It subtracted order, right? And it didn't collapse. And so the way that it worked, if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, is that CNN says this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then I shift the numbers 1, 2, 3. So number 3 is now number 1. And so that's how it moves forward. But a transformer says that I have only one square for position at the end, and I will put your number in it. And so if you have 10,000 words, every word has a label 1 to 10,000 in one of the squares. And so the structure remains the same, but it continues to move. And so that one square allows it to be self-attention driven. And so, and so that meant that we were now seeing a path. If a technical person will now see a path for algorithms that have an infinite scalability in terms of contextualization. We don't know about reasoning and language and all of that. That came later with GPT. But contextualization now had a path. And so if contextualization now had a path with words, it was a matter of time before it happened with images. It was the right time to build a computer vision company. And that's kind of the way that we made the decision.
See, when you're working in this space, there's always this question of, one, you talked about localization,
Yes.
or the personalization aspects, and the ethics that go with that.
Yes.
So if you are in computer vision, you need to recognize objects, recognize people, recognize whatever context and so on. You do need some memory of the past to be able to relate to it, like you said, training the model or whatever. But at the same time, adapt it to the current situation and then maybe make predictions, right?
Yes.
When you put in all these things, how do you ensure that the system stays under control, or it doesn't either hallucinate or go off into false positives and so on?
So I think there are two ways to this. But first, the counter example is interesting, right? So the counter example today, when you look at security guards and security cameras, is if you look at how a security guard identifies a threat on the ground, what exactly is going through their mind? One of the key questions is if there is a crowd, he is suddenly seeing that one person is an anomalous character. And then an experienced security guard we'll then continue to monitor this person. Like, oh, I see him here. I now pop my attention to camera number 64, which is the next place he's going to go and see what he's doing and so on. And then they start to track one guy. The background behind that is that they have a idea. They have three pieces of information that is informing this. One is that normal behavior in the space, right? They have hypothesis of what the anomaly might be. And third is that they are profiling the person, right? So let's say you're a security guard in a school and there are students and one of them is acting pretty nuts, but he's also a student. It's like, okay, it's probably a student acting dumb. Okay, ignore, right? So there is a profiling component, right? And so one of the questions is, what do you do with AI? I think the way that we did it to answer that question is that the first thing we did was that we avoided the profiling question.
Okay.
Our narrative is, could you completely bypass the profiling question, except maybe with a set of 3 or 4 objective things? For example, an adult is classified as an adult in the school. And so just so that we are monitoring adults with a different set of rules from a child, hypothetically, or something like that, right? So that's the only major thing that we do with that. One of the reasons why we have to do that is because we also look at lost children. And so if you run in a theme park, right, a child walking around with adults that they didn't come into the theme park with is worth checking out. Whether it's okay or not, it's okay, but it is worth checking out. And so that's one of the things to look at. So then if we avoid the profiling question, then there are 2 things you need to question. One is, what do you replace it with? So your system will be worse. If you used to have 3 data points, now you have 2. And so the second is that you have to do the second 2 much better. And the way that we do the second 2 much better is that we go deep in the question of behavior. And you mentioned very precisely the right way to think about it, which is that you're not talking about anomalous behavior, you're talking about contextually anomalous behavior. So what I mean by that is so for example, if you go to Loretta's YouTube channel, there's one video in it, there is a lady who is sitting on a bench in the middle of the night. He then goes on to sit on a bench in the middle of the night in 4 different benches that same night. Okay, just hangs around and sits on the bench for 2 or 3 minutes, and very short, not enough, not like she's not tired, right? So you sit down for 3 minutes, she moves to another bench. Does it 4 times. The algorithm says, go and check this lady and also check the benches that you're sitting in. Okay? That's how it works. How did we do that? One is that we didn't tell the person who this lady is. We don't know. We did tell them where the benches were and what day it was, which is that it was in a place of significance. It was on January 5th, 2021, and she was sitting on 5 different benches. And that was the only data that we provided, and it said, go and check the benches. If you fast forward 24 hours later, you would then find that there was a pipe bomb discovered underneath one of the benches. On the day of the 2022 inauguration of Donald Trump. The inauguration of Joe Biden, right? So when he abdicated, and so that was the narrative. That was what actually happened. Okay, but this is what the algorithm is. So what the algorithm is, it is doing the context component, integrating with the person and doing that. The 2 key technologies that makes this possible, one is our system does something called non-biometric VID very well. This is very similar to your digital cookie. Your digital cookie doesn't know who you are, but it knows that this IP address went here and then went there. And then when you go to a new page, it also remembers which page you came from. And that's kind of the basis of all of Google's advertising network was based on this original technology. We do that. The second thing that we do is that we run what we call true anomaly detection. And true anomaly detection means that it says that a behavior is abnormal, and then once it is abnormal, those frames get sent over to another algorithm that classifies what the behavior is. So it's like, it seems abnormal, and then why is it normal? And then you aggregate the anomalies together. Because if a lady sat on a bench for 3 minutes in the middle of the night, If you took that video, and this video, by the way, is a video provided by the FBI. It is a publicly available video. Your ChatGPT will tell you that this person is probably a delivery driver that's very tired. And when you aggregate it together, it's like, okay, she's not a delivery driver. She's a little bit too sus for that. And it's like, we should find out what's going on. That's where you get the narrative change. And so it is an estimation of intent, right? So we don't know exactly what the intent is, but we can estimate enough that we can approach it. And we still believe in the final hand has to be a human hand. So somebody still needs to be the human that decides at the end of the narrative. Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I think these kind of use cases actually make it a lot more useful directly for people. And today, unfortunately, the hype is all AI equals ChatGPT, which is in a way sad. Yeah.
In a way sad. It's in a way sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that there's gonna be I think in a way sad, but also in a way I think it's not gonna change. Because what will happen is two things. So one is I remember an interview with Thomas Lafont, and Thomas Lafont from Cotu, famous VC, was one of the early investors in OpenAI, and he essentially said even if all the foundation models start to become the same, ChatGPT still has the market share in terms of brain space like Google. And he said maybe that's going to be where all my money comes from. That's one thing that I think is true. But second is that ChatGPT is now synonymous with contextualization.
Yeah.
And I think the contextualization component will be the main component. And so, yeah, maybe it will succeed. Maybe it will be the driver. We'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. On that note, Galvin, we are really running out of time.
Yeah.
I think I would like to have a conversation with you separately on a lot more things that kind of came up. Thanks a lot for coming on the show and sharing your very, I would say, inspiring story, and then how you've been able to blend the original, the technology that you studied, or the quant and things from there, and applying it to the bleeding edge applications of AI and solving real problems. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.